Warner did as governor of Virginia, manage his economy, balance his budget, and I appreciate his leadership in the Congress and the Senate to try to produce something worthwhile for the nation. So we can do better, and we've got to do better, and the American people are entitled to it. I thank the Chair. Would yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
General speeches on the Senate floor for the next 30 minutes or so. Senate leaders Reid and McConnell came to the floor earlier to say that progress is being made on some of the remaining issues keeping Congress in session. Fiscal year 2012 spending, the House-approved payroll tax cut, and the Medicare doc fix. Government funding is set to run out at midnight tonight. And at about noon, we do expect debate on the payroll tax cut bill. Votes on the measure are expected tomorrow morning unless the Senate can agree to hold that vote sooner. Leaders, of course, continuing to work to hammer out agreement. During a quick briefing earlier today, House Republican leaders discussed the status of negotiations, and Speaker John Boehner also reiterated his commitment to get the Keystone XL pipeline included as a part of the payroll tax cut bill.
I ask unanimous consent that the quorum call be vitiated.
Without objection.
Mr. President, thank you. I know we're all anxious to reach a conclusion on significant legislation that is pending. It determines many things important to Americans, and it creates the opportunity for members of the Senate and the House to spend a little time at home during the holiday season. And I'm reminded how blessed I am this holiday season to return home to a rural state where family values and community traditions run deep. There's no tradition more important to us than how we pass on from one generation to the next the workings on a family farm. And I am worried that these rural traditions are under attack by Washington, D.C., and in September, our Department of Labor proposed new rules that would ban youth under the age of 16 from participating in what is many common farm-related tasks, like rounding up cattle on horseback or operating a tractor, cleaning out stalls with a shovel and a wheelbarrow. And while I'm sure there's many 15 and 16-year-olds who would be happy not to do that work, it's important work, and it's a way that fathers and sons, mothers and daughters, grandparents work side by side with family members. One of the things that I care a lot about is agriculture, and that matters to us in places like Kansas because that's the economy of our communities. But I also know that it's important for other reasons as well, not just dollars and cents. It's important because it's how historically in this country we've passed on our values from one generation to the next, that working side by side with moms and dads and grandparents is the way that we pass on character and value and integrity from one generation to the next. And it's something that throughout the history of our country has been important across our nation when really every place was a rural part of our nation. To most young people growing up on that family farm, those jobs are routine. It's a part of their lives. And these Department of Labor regulations are going to intrude significantly in that ability. According to the American Farm Bureau Federation, about 98% of our country's 2 million farms are family-owned. By working alongside with those parents and grandparents, important skills and values are learned. And the problem that we face now is that agriculture as a way of life the Department of Labor wants to change that. Until recently, farms jointly owned and operated by multiple family members had discretion over the responsibilities they gave their children on the farm. But this new rule would do away with that freedom. The Department of Labor is proposing to tell farmers and ranchers, we know what's best for your children and what they should and should not be doing. The Department of Labor is also trying to do away with successful farm safety training and certification programs. In our part of the country and around the nation, 4-H and FFA, county extension offices, are very important, and they play a critical role in training and certifying young people to safely carry on farm activities. That happens today. But the department has ignored research that shows such programs improve safety habits of young people and instead criticizes these training programs for being too locally driven and lacking federal direction. One would assume that before making such a drastic change to farm labor rules, the department would identify reliable evidence and data that shows the need for changes. But really it's quite the opposite. In fact, the Department of Labor admits that it lacks the data to justify many of its suggested changes. Furthermore, according to the National Farm Medicine Center, youth-related injuries from farm accidents have declined by nearly 60% from 1998 to 2009. If you ask any farmer or rancher about the importance of safety, they would tell you that safety is at the top of their list. It's their children, it's their neighbors' children. They care greatly. But they would also tell you that it's critical to the rural way of life for being able to train and encourage a next generation to safely and successfully begin careers in agriculture. If today's young people are not given the chance to learn at a young age what it takes to operate a farm, we put at risk the future of agriculture in our nation. If these changes go into effect, not only will the shrinking rural workforce be further reduced and our nation's youth be deprived of valuable career training opportunities, but most importantly, a way of life begins to disappear. Our country cannot afford to lose the next generation of farmers and ranchers. I shared my concerns with the Secretary of Labor several weeks ago in which we asked for a delay in a longer comment period. The comment period was running during fall harvest across most of the country, and the Department of Labor granted a 30-day extension, but that 30-day extension expired December the 1st, about 2 weeks ago. Parents and communities should be allowed to look after the best interests of their families and citizens, and now that that comment period has run, I hope the Department of Labor will take into account the serious concerns by farmers and ranchers, their families, and agribusiness across the country. But just a delay in a longer comment period is insufficient, and in fact, I'm circulating a letter among my colleagues here in the Senate asking them to sign requesting the Department of Labor not to proceed to implement these rules. And I would ask my colleagues to take a look at that letter and please join me. Local experts should be the ones that are conducting safety training programs to educate our nation's young people. The future of agriculture depends on stopping this vast overreach of executive authority and protecting individual rights. We know that rural America's values are not always the values held here in Washington, D.C. In the weeks ahead, I will continue to work with my colleagues to make certain that this destructive rule does not move forward so that we can protect and preserve our values for the next generation of American farmers and ranchers, values that our country so desperately needs. Mr. President, if I can slightly change topics, although not really, one of those beneficiaries of growing up on a family farm in Kansas is somebody I'd also like to mention just briefly here this morning. As members of Congress, we surround ourselves with bright minds and fellow natives of our home states. I've had the privilege of working alongside a young man, Aaron Popelka, as a member of my staff for 6 years. In those years, Aaron has proven himself to be a thoughtful voice in a chaotic Capitol Hill culture. With a bright policy mind, Aaron has advised me on agriculture and energy and trade policy while also serving as my chief counsel. A native of Munden, Kansas, Aaron grew up on a farm and brought with him to Washington, D.C. a common-sense approach to the way he conducted his duties on behalf of our state. Aaron will continue his duties on behalf of Kansans, but in a different fashion. Aaron has accepted a position back home in Kansas and will lead my staff at the end of the year. The lure of returning home to Kansas is powerful. Over the years, I've lost valued members of my staff, much like the rest of you. However, I appreciate the fact that while their departures from Washington, D.C. it's not pleasing to me, more often than not, they return home to Kansas, and the result is a benefit to our home state. I'm thankful for having had Aaron as a member of my staff, and I'm thankful for the faithful service he has provided to my fellow citizens in our home state. But I'm most thankful for his friendship, and I look forward to our paths crossing again back home. So, Aaron, best of luck to you, and may God bless you and your family. Mr. President, I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Mr. President.
Senator from Indiana.
Mr. President, I ask for unanimous consent to initiate the call of the quorum.
Without objection.
Mr. President, what is the current status of, are we in morning business?
We are in morning business.
I would ask unanimous consent to speak for up to 15 minutes.
Without objection.
Mr. President, thank you. This is a holiday season coming upon us, a period of celebration and joy. But as we prepare to spend time with our friends and our families in the coming weeks, it's important to remember that there are many families out there that are hurting across this country. As I visit with Hoosiers, people from Indiana, I hear concern in the voices of parents trying to make the mortgage payment, the manufacturer trying to find work, and the business owner trying to make payroll. Too many Hoosier families have a parent unemployed, underemployed, some working 2 or 3 jobs just to scrape by. For nearly 3 years, we've been hearing that this nation needs good-paying jobs for people, and we've been trying to provide that. The President has spoken on this on numerous occasions. In his inaugural address back in 2009, he said, and I quote, "There's work to be done. The state of our economy calls for action, bold and swift. And we will act," he said, "not only to create new jobs, but to lay a new foundation for growth." A year later, in June 2010, the President said, "Our top priority is to recover and rebuild from a recession that has touched the lives of nearly every American." And just 2 months ago, the President said, "Everywhere I go, they tell me they want action on jobs." Well, despite the rhetoric, what we have and what we're dealing with are a series of regulations and policies coming out of the White House that are denying Americans the opportunity to have jobs and preventing job creators from going forward, either through regulations that are hampering their ability to do this or through policies here that we have or have not enacted that would encourage growth and economic opportunity and jobs. Now, for nearly 34 consecutive months, unemployment has been hovering around the 9% official level, and we all know that the real unemployment number is much higher than that. There are people that have given up looking and they're no longer counted. There are people that are working at pay levels and talent levels far below their abilities. They're working 2 and 3 jobs. And so the underemployment number combined with the unemployment number is very, very significant and much higher than what the official number is. Now, for weeks and months, I've been on this floor talking about a whole number of initiatives that I thought was necessary to move our economy and get us moving forward again. Comprehensive tax reform is something that Senator Wyden and I, on a bipartisan basis, have engaged in, and we've been talking about it all year. And yet here we are at the end of the session, and we're not going to be able to accomplish that this year. Hopefully, we'll give it a run next year, and hopefully we can make some progress on that. There's almost a unanimous consensus that comprehensive tax reform, a very complicated, misdirected tax code, this needs to take place. And yet we've now spent a year talking about it, but not doing it. We also know that issues like entitlement reform and reducing the out-of-control spending here is necessary to put us on a more solid footing. And despite the valiant efforts of many and the hard work of many in this chamber, Republicans and Democrats, we've been unable to accomplish and succeed and reach our goal. And much of this difficulty, frankly, has been because the White House has not taken leadership, and the President has not stepped up and engaged in fulfilling the very things that he said are the most important things that we need to do. Let me cite just two examples. The first one is still under discussion and hopefully will be part of what we're able to accomplish before we finish here, either late this weekend or into next week, and that is the Keystone Pipeline. By delaying a decision for a year, the President essentially is saying we are denying 20,000 or more individuals from gaining work, from becoming a part of the process of building this pipeline, which is so needed and so important for the future of this country. We talk about our dependence on Middle East oil and the blood and treasure that we've had to spend to keep those sea lanes open and that oil flowing to the United States, and yet we deny the opportunity to mine our own domestic energy sources and to use sources that come from Canada, Mexico, the United States, or off our shores. The Keystone Pipeline is a pipeline that, if constructed and when constructed, will bring a minimum of about 750 million barrels of oil to this country for refining purposes. It will provide an estimated 20,000 new jobs directly and support hundreds of thousands of jobs in coming years indirectly. My state alone, Indiana, has indicated that at least 100 Indiana companies would benefit from the pipeline. And this project has bipartisan support. 22 House Democrats wrote a letter to President Obama and said that it is in our national interest to have a presidential permit issued for Keystone as soon as possible. That's supported by Republicans on this side, and there are negotiations going on, but the President has said if we send him a year-end bill that includes this, he plans to veto it. Now, it just makes no sense whatsoever. It's irrational to say that the number one priority for this country is to get people back to work and to provide jobs, and here we have a ready-made job creator that is being postponed, I suppose, just to pacify some extreme environmentalists who don't want one drop of oil or one piece of coal mined in this country or used in this country to provide energy resources. They think that all we need to do is switch to electric, which, by the way, is only produced through burning coal and oil to provide electricity to plug in your car and make it work, or they want wind and solar. Well, if you've looked outside the window here in Washington or across most of the country in the last few days, and this will last for the next several months, you're going to see a lot of clouds and very little sun. And you're going to see very much wind. I checked the wind on the way over here. The flag was drooping down. You cannot run a factory. You cannot run a business. You can't even light this Senate based on this alternative energy as it currently exists, and it's costing the taxpayer a lot of money. The Keystone Pipeline also has the support of labor and unions. These are the entities that will be providing the jobs for the project. Mark Ayers of the AFL-CIO wrote that, and I quote, "For America's skilled craft construction professionals, any discussion of the Keystone project begins and ends with one word: jobs. Throughout America's heartland," he said, "the Keystone Pipeline represents the prospect of 20,000 immediate jobs and as many as 500,000 indirect jobs via a strong economic multiplier effect without one single dollar of government assistance." That's right. This is totally paid for by the private sector, providing 20,000 jobs immediately, supported by Republicans, supported by Democrats, supported by unions, supported by right-to-work states, supported across the board by those who feel we need more energy independence. And yet the President says, after having assured us that his top priority is creating jobs, the President says, nope, we're going to yield to some extreme voices on the environmental left that basically say no more oil, no more pipelines, no more coal, fossil fuels are out, it's wind, solar, or batteries or nothing. So I think I'm just asking the President of the United States to reconsider this at a time when we are struggling in this country to provide meaningful employment for people. A common sense solution to one of our problems is right there before us. And yet we hear from the President that no, he's going to postpone the decision for a year to get past, probably, to get past the 2012 election. So it's a political decision, it appears, that is denying a lot of people work at a time when it's desperately needed. Now, at the same time that the President is asking the Congress to extend unemployment benefits, primarily because of failed economic policies, the White House is blocking this opportunity. And another immediate action the administration can take would be to accept a modest and reasonable provision which would provide a reasonable time of delay on two costly EPA, Environmental Protection Agency regulations, that will deal another devastating blow to our already fragile economy. In the next few days, the Environmental Protection Agency is expected to finalize a rule that could threaten over 20% of the coal-fired power plant generation in the Midwest and the Southeast. And now we've learned that it also has a dramatic adverse effect on power plants in the states of Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. So a major part of the country will be affected by this. Known as Utility MACT, M-A-C-T, this regulation will force most of our country's 1,100 coal-fired plants to retrofit their facilities or close their doors. The Partnership for Affordable Clean Energy reported that the closure of U.S. coal-fired power plants will accelerate sharply during the next 10 years because of this utility rule. The EPA's expected announcement on the utility rule comes just after it issued another major rule that will cost additional thousands of American jobs because starting in January 1, the EPA will begin requiring utilities to reduce power plant emissions that may cause air quality complications in neighboring states. That regulation, called the Cross-State Air Pollution Rule, or CASPR, is also one of the most expensive policies ever imposed on coal-fired plants. Under this rule, the EPA will require plants to install costly control technologies in exchange for minimal environmental gains. The combined economic impact of the two regulations that I've just mentioned, the combined economic impact of that is alarming. The Indiana Energy Association estimates that the cost of these rules will be between $6.5 and $7.3 billion just in my own state of Indiana. And would you add literally now the whole eastern half of the country from the Mississippi on over that will be directly affected by this, this number goes up exponentially. The National Economic Research Associates estimates net employment losses of 1.4 million across the country as a result of the current EPA rules and deadlines. And by 2016, NERA reports that American ratepayers will see an average increase of up to 23.5%, in some places even more, of their utility rates. Now, I want to say this. Cleaning our air is a worthy goal, and hundreds of billions of dollars have been spent under the Clean Air Act, which I supported in the 80s and early 90s. Because as Americans, we all want to clean our air. And hundreds of billions of dollars have been spent by our utilities, and we've been paying for it through our electric costs, to clean the air. And the progress that we've made has been astounding. And the provisions that are being offered that were being offered in a bill that Senator Manchin, a Democrat from West Virginia, and I offered together in a bipartisan basis, do not turn back or unwind the progress that we made. And in fact, they don't deny further progress. All they do is simply extend the compliance date for a 3-year period of time and coordinate that compliance date so that utilities can accomplish both of these goals as set out by the EPA accomplish both of those goals, but in a reasonable time frame, without having a Damocles sword hanging over them, because this rule is going to begin to take effect on January 1 of just this next year, 2012. So we're asking for a little more time. Now, we had a vote here, which I supported, which was to deny these rules. And I supported that because of the substantial progress we've made and the tremendous economic cost it would be to impose these directly on the timetable EPA has set forth. That vote, which is led by Senator Rand Paul, was defeated. And so we've moved now to the next stage, the fallback, which is simply an opportunity to reach the goal, but give us a little more time to reach it. And so I urge the President to consider the Manchin-Coates Act, which is Fair Compliance Act, called Fair Compliance Act, bipartisan legislation to delay the implementation of these harmful EPA rules. Otherwise, our utilities will not have the time to adequately prepare. We will be shutting them down. They're predicting blackouts or rolling blackouts or predicting substantial increases in utility rates at a time when the economy is struggling, and we need every competitive advantage we can get through our manufacturers in order to compete around the world and keep people and get people back to work and back into jobs. Having said that, let me just say one more thing. Mr. President, we spent the year here disappointing from my perspective in trying to address our dire fiscal situation. And we've tried just about everything and every process and every procedure that people can think up. And each one of those has achieved just either minimal results or failed completely. And so after evaluating and looking at the extraordinary effort and energy and time put into the process this year with very few results, it has become ever clearer to me, something that it has reaffirmed something I've believed from day one when I first got into politics, that unless you put in place a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution, which will require members to come down to this well and before the President of the Senate put their left hand on the Bible and their right hand in the air and swear to uphold the Constitution, which incorporates a balanced budget requirement, we're never going to get there. There is always a reason why something statutorily or all the effort, the Gang of Six, the Committee of 12, the rush to a crisis with raising the debt limit, the cliffhangers that are they going to pass this or not pass this? Are they going to extend the debt limit, not extend the debt limit? All the provisions for the appropriations process to cut spending and reduce government involvement and so forth have essentially failed. And what we need to do is what most states in this country do, what every business has to do, what every family has to do, and that is commit to balancing our budget, not spending more than what we take in, and having a constitutional sworn-to agreement that this is what we will do before we adjourn every session and go home. My state of Indiana has to do this. Many states across the country have to do this successfully, and they do, because the transparency and the honesty and the forthrightness of members going before their constituents and say, you know, that's a great idea, that program, but we can't afford it. Now, if you're willing to support our raising your taxes, we could put that new program in place. Or if you're willing to support a cut in some other program to use that money to put that new idea in place, then we can look at it. But we, as elected members and representatives of our constituents and of our states, are sworn to uphold a constitutional amendment which will require us to balance our budget. And this is healthy for us. Mr. President, I think my time is about running out. I've asked for just, you have to consent for 2 more minutes, and I'll wrap it up.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank my colleagues. If we don't do this, if we don't have this ultimate enforcement mechanism, I fear that we will just continue to what we've been doing for years and years and years, and that is falling far short of where we need to go, and I think where most of us know we need to go, to make the tough decisions, to be honest with our constituents, to go forward and basically say, This is what our sworn obligation is, and we're going to have to fulfill this obligation. Nothing else has succeeded in forcing this body to come together and, on a bipartisan basis or even on a partisan basis, do what is necessary to get our fiscal house in order. And the people at this holiday season who are without work or struggling to pay the mortgage or struggling to save money for their kids going to school, struggling to pay the bills, wondering what the future is going to hold, can't find a job, working 2 or 3 jobs. They're all out there saying, we've got to get this together. We've got to get this country moving again. And we cannot do that if we are plunging into debt or if the policies coming out of this administration are denying our people the right to work in jobs that are available for us, like the Keystone Pipeline, or if regulations are running up our utility costs. I can't even pay the utility costs now, they say. Barely pay them now, and if you're going to raise it 20 or 30% because of these regulations and because you can't just extend for a modest period of time implementation of this for clean air, which we're all for, then it's not going to be the kind of joyful, happy celebration at Christmas that we all would wish for all of our families all across America. Mr. President, with that, I yield the floor and suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
That the quorum call be vitiated.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I have a number of consents that I will offer. I ask unanimous consent that the period for morning business be extended until 5 p.m. with senators permitted to speak for up to 10 minutes each.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to the consideration of S-2009, introduced earlier today.
The clerk will report.
S-2009, a bill to improve the administration of programs in the insular areas and for other purposes.
Is there objection to proceeding to the measure? Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent the bill be read 3 times and passed. The motion to reconsider be laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate, and any statements relating to the matter be placed in the record as if read.
Without objection.
I have one unanimous consent request for a committee to meet during today's session of the Senate. It has the approval of the majority and minority leaders. I ask unanimous consent that this request be agreed to and that this request be printed in the record.
Without objection.
And finally, Mr. President, I just ask consent that following my remarks that Senator Hutchinson be recognized for floor remarks.
Without objection.
Mr. President, thank you very much. I rise to speak about the payroll tax cut that we've been debating and considering these many weeks, and also that we seem to be making some progress on today, and I know we'll hear more about that later today. I wanted to make a couple of points. First of all, about the issue itself, then a few points about what's happening in Pennsylvania. I'm going to highlight some of the constituent mail that we've received about this issue and about the state of the economy and people's lives. But first and foremost, just by way of review, we've had a number of weeks now of debate about the payroll tax and putting in place an agreement where both parties can come together to make sure that we put in place the payroll tax cut that we agreed to last year. And as many know who've been watching this know what that means. Instead of having an individual worker, an employee, pay 6.2% as a payroll tax, we reduced that last year to 4.2%. I think it's vital that we, at a minimum, that we do that we extend it. Now, I had two pieces of legislation, two different versions to reduce that even more, to cut it in half, and also to do the same for businesses. I think that's a good idea, but for whatever reason we haven't reached agreement on that. But we seem to have made progress the last couple of days, even in the last couple of hours, coming together on an agreement on the payroll tax. We don't have an agreement yet, but we're all working very hard because we all know both the benefits of it and the consequences of not extending the payroll tax cut. The benefits are plainly evident. If we put in place this payroll tax cut, we can jumpstart, kickstart job creation and move the economy forward. And I say that in light of some recent numbers that we have in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania's unemployment rate has hovered around 8% for a long time. The number of people unemployed in our state, the 8% doesn't sound as high as some places, but that meant that over 500,000 people are out of work. It wasn't too long ago, just a few months ago, when we had roughly 525,000 people out of work. That number reduced to about 513,000, and fortunately, just yesterday, we got news that the number has fallen below 500,000 for the first time in a long time. We're at 499,000, not much below 500,000. But that's good news for Pennsylvania. What that meant is our unemployment rate went from 8.1 down to 7.9. So we're below 8. And as many people know, the national rate went below 9 to 8.6. So you're seeing the unemployment rate nationally and in a number of states, including Pennsylvania, going in the right direction, meaning it's going down, the unemployment rate going down. The number of people out of work, fortunately, shrinking a little bit. We have a long way to go to completely dig out of this economic ditch that our economy's been in for a long time. One of the best ways to continue that progress is to pass a cut in the payroll tax again, as we did last year. It was the right thing to do last year. It's the right thing to do this year to continue the progress. We want to make sure that we're doing everything possible so that our month-to-month job creation number is much higher than it's been. We've been averaging in the roughly 150,000 range of private sector job growth. That's not enough. We need that above 200. We even need it above 250,000. If we take this step, it's not the only, there's no magic wand to any policy that we pass here. Cutting the payroll tax won't solve all of our economic challenges, but it is one of the most constructive, one of the most effective steps we can take. If we don't do it, here's the consequence, at least as it relates to Pennsylvania, a big state that has a lot of the economic challenges that many states have. Mark Zandi, a respected economist, did some analysis just on Pennsylvania. If we didn't extend the payroll tax cut, which, as we know, has the potential to benefit 160 million American workers, in my home state of Pennsylvania last year, that meant more than 6.5 million workers had a cut in their payroll tax, a tremendous benefit for a state like Pennsylvania. We grew in the last year about 50,000 jobs. That's the good news. The bad news could be if we didn't pass a payroll tax cut for Pennsylvania, for the country, that would obviously have an impact in Pennsylvania. The job loss number, according to Mark Zandi, would be just shy of 20,000 jobs lost in the state of Pennsylvania in 2012 if we don't pass another cut in the payroll tax. So it's vitally important for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I think that applies for the nation as a whole. It is one of the steps, and frankly maybe one of the few steps that the Congress can take that will have a direct impact, not just on the economy overall, but directly put dollars in people's pockets. Take-home pay. That's what this whole issue is about for employees. What's going to be your take-home pay in 2012? If we pass the tax cut, it'll be about $1,000. If we don't pass the tax cut, it'll be zero in terms of an extra benefit. Working Americans who have been struggling through this economy and suffering should have a right to expect that we take the action that they're telling us to take to cut the payroll tax. Let me just cite two examples of what people are asking us to do, two constituents, and then I'll conclude my remarks. Here is a letter from a woman in Pennsylvania, central Pennsylvania. I won't give you her name. We don't have the authority to do that, but I wanted to read some of her words. Here's what she says about how she perceives Washington and what's happening here. Just read you about two sentences. Please make sure, she says, and I'm quoting from the letter, please make sure something is done in Washington before the end of the year. I feel that no one should be able to have a break, talking about us here in Congress, no one should be able to have a break before taking action on the tax breaks that will expire at the end of this year. If you all cannot do this, then you should all leave office and let someone in there who can work together to get things done. Stay on the job, or stay and do your job, period. And then she has two exclamation points after the word period. What she's telling us is what so many Americans are telling us, is that we've got work to do here to come together, to agree, not just on a budget for the next year, but especially on something as fundamental as this payroll tax cut. So she said it very well, and she encapsulated a lot of what people are feeling. I'm just going to read you an excerpt from a second letter from a woman in the eastern side of our state, in the so-called Lehigh Valley of Pennsylvania. I won't read you the whole letter. It's about her family and some of the economic challenges they've had. I'm going to just read you two excerpts. She says, and I'm quoting, "Now I find myself questioning whether or not anyone has an answer. And if they do, will it be too late? You see, over the last 2 years, all 4 members of my family, myself included, have lost our jobs," unquote. That's one family in one part of Pennsylvania talking about how many members of her family have lost their jobs. And she expects us to get our job done here, to come together and to work together to pass a cut in the payroll tax. Later in the letter she says this, and I'll conclude with this quotation. Quote, "We need to put people back to work. Only then can the economy get turned around. I don't care who comes up with the plan, but the parties need to work together if this country is going to survive. My family is only one example. I know of so many others who are struggling and in an even worse position than we are," unquote. She's talking about other people being in a worse circumstance, and she's got all 4 members, including herself, of her family, who have lost their jobs in the course of the last year or so. So if she can demonstrate, this woman from the Lehigh Valley of Pennsylvania, she can demonstrate that kind of empathy and compassion and understanding of what others are going through when she herself and her family have suffered so substantially in this economy. The least that we can do here in the United States Senate, here in Washington, the very least that we can do is come together and work together to get this job done. And the leading indicator of that, I would argue, is making sure that we put in place a cut in the payroll tax. So that at a minimum, as people are still doing holiday shopping and still wanting to have a bright, happy holiday and want to have some measure of peace of mind, some measure of security about next year, that they at least know that we came together and made sure that this payroll tax cut was in place. It's vital for the people of Pennsylvania, and I think it's essential for economic growth across the country. We need to come together and get this done. Mr. President, I would yield the floor. And